Picture a desperate sheriff clinging to his family's rundown cabin that's inches away from foreclosure. Across town, a lonely widow, 73 years old, offers him a once-in-a-lifetime escape, marry her, inherit her grand mansion, and wipe away his debts. Sounds unthinkable, right? But that's exactly how Connor Walters finds himself standing at a makeshift altar, exchanging vows with Judge Rowland's formidable widow. 5 days later, an even bigger shock unfolds. A hidden legacy buried by secrets and betrayal threatens their uneasy alliance. Has the sheriff stepped into a life of riches only to discover something far more dangerous lurking in the shadows? If these questions hook you, stay with us for the full story. You won't want to miss the intrigue that unravels behind high walls and hushed whispers. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more dramatic, heartfelt tales that remind us how one choice can upend everything. Your support means the world. Stick around and see how it all plays out. Late in the waning sunlight of an October evening, Sheriff Connor Walters paused outside the single foreclosure office in River Pines County, Montana. His well-worn Stetson dangled from one hand while the other gripped a sheaf of papers that spelled out defeat for the small cabin his family had held for 3 generations. A stoic resignation masked the turmoil beneath his calm exterior. Nearby, Gloria Harris, a county clerk who'd known him since childhood, stamped a large red final notice across the documents and let out a regretful sigh. "I pushed everything as far as I could, Connor," she murmured. "But Parkland Bank isn't known for leniency. By next week, the place goes on the auction list." Connor offered a tight nod, forcing a half smile of thanks. At 42, the lines in his sun-bronzed face told of long hours on the range of heartbreak and duty that overshadowed personal needs. This cabin wasn't just a piece of property. It was the last tangible link to his parents who had died 2 decades earlier in a car crash. Since then, he had raised his younger sister, Claire, seeing her through college, and more recently a grave illness that left him financially drained. He never regretted the mortgage he'd taken out to pay for her treatments, only that he couldn't meet the ballooning payments. The dusty parking lot smelled of pine, and the onset of winter. Connor walked to his aging quarter horse, Dakota, tied to a post near a row of official pickups. They were both showing signs of wear like him. Dakota had carried burdens for years. Mounting the horse with ingrained habit, Connor guided Dakota along the gravel road that wound back through stands of tall evergreens and over a narrow creek bridge. His uniform felt oddly heavy against his skin, each lawman's badge pinned to a failing cause he no longer felt certain he could uphold. The last few miles to his homestead were heartbreakingly scenic rolling hills with tall pines, glimpses of Lake Winston shimmering between the trees. A few large estates dotted the hillsides, mostly owned by wealthy out-of-staters who visited in summer, leaving them empty for the harsh Montana winters. Connor hardly noticed these silent mansions. His focus was on the dirt path leading to the worn cabin roof that soon wouldn't be his. Inside the simple structure, memories saturated every log and plank. Here was the kitchen table where he and Claire once did homework under a single hanging light bulb. There was the mantel where their father's old rifle sat collecting dust. The walls were still adorned with the same tattered pictures: a family trip to Glacier National Park, the county fair where his mother's pie had won a ribbon, his father standing proud with a fresh catch of trout. The emptiness now sank into Connor's chest with a new crushing weight. After he unsaddled Dakota and checked her feed, Connor flipped through a stack of overdue bills by the flickering lamp. No matter how many times he crunched the numbers, the conclusion was the same. He earned enough to cover day-to-day costs, but the balloon payments and penalties from Parkland Bank were insurmountable. The cabin was lost. The only mercy was that Claire, teaching at a Denver elementary school, remained blissfully unaware of this crisis. He'd shielded her from the worst of it, as an older brother always would. In the morning, Connor arrived at the small sheriff's office on Main Street of River Pines County, an unassuming brick building where a single star was etched above the door. His desk overflowed with the reports of vandalism, stray livestock, and neighborly disputes, the usual business for a rural community with limited resources. He barely settled into routine paperwork before Mayor Watkins entered, wearing a tailored suit that looked out of place next to battered desks and old filing cabinets. "Sheriff Walters," the mayor greeted him, offering a politician's practiced smile. "Heard you had a meeting at the foreclosure office." Connor stiffened, wondering how news had traveled so fast, yet it wasn't surprising in a close-knit town. "You heard right, Mayor. My place will be on the auction block soon." Watkins' expression remained neutral. "I might have a solution," he said, lowering his voice. "If you're open to hearing it." Connor's brow furrowed, but curiosity overrode his caution. "Go on. There's a pressing matter involving Beatrice Rowland, widow of Judge William Rowland. You know the Rowland family's Cedarvale estate on Lake Winston. Everyone in River Pines County knew about Cedarvale Estate. It was the grand Victorian mansion that crowned a gentle slope overlooking the lake built generations ago by the Rowland clan. Judge Rowland had passed away 14 months prior, and rumors swirled about disputes over his will. Mrs. Rowland is in a precarious legal position, Watkins explained. Judge Rowland's former law partner, Richard Denning, is challenging the final amendments to the judge's will. Denning claims the judge was mentally incompetent when he revised it to leave Cedarvale entirely to Beatrice. Connor shrugged. That's a matter for probate court, not the sheriff's department. Under normal circumstances, yes, Watkins continued. But Ms. Rowland has a proposition. She wants a husband, someone with impeccable standing in the county to shore up her legal defense. A man known for honesty and duty would silence gossip about the judge's mental state. That man is you, Connor. Connor blinked astonished. She wants me to marry her. The mayor nodded. A purely pragmatic union, or so it seems. She'd settle all your debts, give you a home at Cedarvale Estate, and in due course, given her advanced age and poor health, you'd inherit. She's 73 battling congestive heart failure. The doctors say 2 years, maybe less. Connor set his jaw, feeling both outrage and an odd flicker of possibility. He was both appalled that the mayor expected him to look after her until she died, and strangely relieved that an option existed to save his cabin and shield Claire from finding out how dire things had become. That's borderline indecent, he muttered, though the practicality gnawed at him. You'd be doing a service, Watkins pressed, protecting a vulnerable widow from Denning's unscrupulous tactics, ensuring the estate remains in local hands. She'll pay off your property deposit $10,000 up front and provide monthly funds. On her death, you inherit Cedarvale. Connor dismissed the mayor with an abrupt politeness. Unable to stomach more discussion, he needed time to think. As the mayor left, Connor found himself staring at the battered star pinned to his chest. This star had symbolized a lifelong devotion to law and community, but saving his family's home overshadowed all else. By nightfall, the unstoppable logic of necessity had worn him down. He'd at least meet with Beatrice Rowland, see what exactly she offered and whether he could abide it. Cedarvale Estate came into view late the next day as Connor guided his dusty truck up a long, curving gravel drive lined with lanterns. Evening light gilded the Victorian spires and wraparound porch, bathing it in a warm glow. Carefully groomed lawns stretched toward Lake Winston in the distance. The air smelled of freshly clipped box hedges and a tinge of jasmine wafting from meticulously kept flower beds. Connor felt every crease of his only suit jacket, conscious of his scuffed boots that seemed embarrassingly out of place. A silver-haired butler named Jameson greeted him at the door, leading him through a tiled foyer where chandeliers sparkled overhead. The furnishings were antique, polished to a sheen that spoke of old money and generational care. Gilt-framed paintings, likely ancestors of Judge Rowland, lined the walls, staring imperiously as Connor passed. In a high-ceilinged parlor, Beatrice Rowland rose to meet him. She was tall, carrying her 73 years with a regal bearing. Her silver hair was swept into an elegant chignon, and she wore a simple yet expensive burgundy dress that accentuated a figure still poised despite obvious fragility in her posture. Her hazel eyes regarded Connor with clear intelligence, measuring him just as thoroughly as he measured her. Sheriff Walters, she greeted, voice cultured and low. Thank you for coming. Please sit. He settled onto a velvet-upholstered armchair, painfully aware of the worn cuffs of his suit. Nearby, Mayor Watkins and Dr. Stephen Carlisle, Pinterest's leading physician, sipped tea. Jameson handed Connor a cup, which he accepted but didn't drink. We'll be direct, Beatrice said, clasping her hands gracefully in her lap. I find myself targeted by Richard Denning, Judge Rowland's former partner. He claims William was senile when he altered his will in my favor. Denning aims to break that will, possibly forcing Cedarvale's sale to out-of-state developers. Connor nodded, recalling the mayor's summary. And your solution is to marry someone with a sterling reputation to undermine Denning's narrative, that you manipulated an ailing judge. Beatrice offered a slight smile. Sterling might be too lofty a term. Sheriff, but yes, you hold a respected office known for integrity. If a man of your standing chooses to marry me, it suggests Judge Rowland's mental acuity was hardly in question. It aligns me publicly with the county's law enforcement leadership. Still uncertain. Connor set his teacup on a side table. What would I get in return? Financial stability, she said simply. I'll settle your debts immediately. Your cabin remains in your hands. $10,000 is placed in your name. And once I pass on, Cedarvale will be yours unless you choose to transfer it. I'm unwell, Sheriff. My doctors give me a year or two at best. It was every bit as blunt as he'd feared. Marry her, wait for her heart to fail. Inherit a mansion and land worth millions. Connor suppressed a grimace at the thought, yet the shame of accepting such a proposition warred with a sense of profound relief that he might keep his family legacy. I'll think on it, he said at last, jaw tight. Beatrice gave a single, dignified nod. I'll expect your decision by noon tomorrow. I dislike drawn-out negotiations. On the drive back, Connor replayed the conversation grappling with moral reservations, but the ticking clock on his cabin forced him to see practicality over pride. By dawn, he had decided he would meet her ultimatum. Around noon, wearing his uniform like a shield, he returned to Cedarvale and agreed to the marriage. 24 hours later, Connor stood in the estate's sunlit conservatory, newly minted, as Mr. Beatrice Rowland. The ceremony was shockingly brief, performed by a local judge friend of the Rowlands, with only the mayor, Dr. Carlisle, and Jameson as witnesses. Beneath a cascade of blooming orchids, Connor slid a simple gold band onto Beatrice's finger. He couldn't help reflecting on how surreal this was. Less than a week ago, he risked losing everything. Now he wore a ring symbolizing an arrangement that felt more like a business contract than a romantic vow. After signing the marriage documents, Beatrice quietly dismissed their small audience. Then she turned to Connor, offering a handshake in place of a kiss. Thank you for honoring your word. Cedarvale's staff will ensure your belongings are transferred. Jameson will prepare quarters for you in the East Wing. That was that. No honeymoon, no pictures, just a handshake and a kindly delivered. Welcome to Cedarvale Estate, Connor mumbled, polite thanks inwardly, marveling at the directness of it all. The next morning, he woke in a luxurious four-poster bed in a suite bigger than his entire cabin. Feeling like he'd stepped into someone else's life, Jameson brought him breakfast, a courtesy Connor wasn't used to, along with a neatly typed schedule. Mrs. Rowland requests your presence in the library at 10, the butler murmured. She wishes to review certain financial matters and discuss tonight's dinner plans. Showered and wearing the only dress shirt he had, other than his uniform, Connor found the library with some difficulty. Cedarvale was a maze, corridors with polished floors, artwork from centuries past, and furniture that probably cost more than he made in 2 years. He eventually stepped into a grand two-story library with towering shelves of books, a spiral staircase leading to a mezzanine, and a massive stone fireplace. Soft sunlight filtered through tall windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Beatrice sat at a large oak desk, scanning a ledger. She looked up as he approached. Good morning. Connor, she said, testing his first name. For the first time, I trust the suite is comfortable. Very, he replied, clearing his throat. And I appreciate the breakfast. Unusual for me to be served, but I'm sure I'll adapt. Her lips curved into the slightest smile. You'll find Cedarvale's routines different from your old life, but we needn't stand on ceremony. I want you to remain yourself, simply with new resources. Let's start by settling your debts. She handed him a folder. Inside were documents verifying the payoff of all outstanding loans on his cabin, along with a bank statement showing a $10,000 deposit in his name. Connor felt a knot release in his chest. Parkland Bank's foreclosure was stopped. His home was safe, thank you, he managed, voice tight. We'll manage the household expenses separately, Beatrice continued. Jameson oversees staff salaries, property maintenance, and so forth. As for you, we agreed on a monthly stipend of $2,000. I expect you'll remain sheriff, so your official pay is yours to keep as well. Sound fair, Connor swallowed, nodding. More than fair. This confirmed the arrangement. The question was what else lay beneath the polite facade of Cedarvale Estate, and the widow who had orchestrated everything with such poise. By the afternoon of his second day as Beatrice's husband, Connor had begun exploring Cedarvale's grounds. The estate spread over 30 lush acres, rolling lawns, meticulously pruned hedges, walking paths through copses of pines and birches. All were designed to showcase Lake Winston's scenic views. He noticed how staff gardeners, a housekeeper, a chef went about their tasks with quiet efficiency, greeting him politely as Sheriff Walters, never once calling him Mr. Rowland. That evening, as dusk painted the sky in shades of purple and orange, Beatrice invited him to her private study. Different from the main library, this smaller room had belonged to the late Judge Rowland. Connor took in the somber mahogany desk, the rows of law books and journals, and the faint smell of old leather. Beatrice motioned for him to sit, then sank into a worn leather armchair with a sigh, her posture hinting at tiredness she seldom displayed. "I want to discuss Richard Denning," she began. "You'll meet him soon if you haven't already. He was William's partner for 40 years, but their friendship fractured when William decided to revise his will. Denning claims William's mental state was failing. I suspect Denning truly wants a portion of Cedarvale for his own gain." Connor nodded. Mayor Watkins mentioned as much. Denning's apparently leveraging everything from rumors to legal technicalities. Beatrice's hazel eyes flashed with quiet determination. Yes. William started noticing unethical behaviors in Denning's practice, overbilling questionable trial tactics, but they remained partners out of mutual loyalty. That loyalty died with William. Denning tries to paint me as a grasping widow. He thinks if he tarnishes my reputation enough, the courts will let him carve up Cedarvale. Connor had read enough about property disputes to know how messy they could become. "You're expecting Denning to make a move soon?" She nodded. "I have it on good authority he's filing a formal objection in probate court next week. The smaller circle in River Pines might accept my marriage to you as legitimate, but Denning will present it as further evidence of my alleged scheming, claiming I married the sheriff. To back my case," Connor exhaled. "I'm prepared to defend the authenticity of our union, though I can't claim it's typical. The question is there more that Denning could use? Secrets about Cedarvale about you?" Beatrice's gaze flicked to the old desk. William was thorough. He kept extensive journals, some referencing Denning's questionable conduct. "If we find them, we might use them if Denning challenges us. But be warned, using a man's own sins to silence him can become a moral quagmire." He rose from the chair, moving to a framed painting of Cedarvale in an earlier era. A younger orchard, fewer hedges, the lake shining in the background. "We'll weigh those decisions carefully," he said. "Thank you," Beatrice murmured, her voice soft yet resonant. "The arrangement started as business, but I'm beginning to value your viewpoint, not just your badge. William always believed in second chances for people, for places. I wonder if this is mine and yours." The quiet sincerity in her words struck Connor. Just days earlier, he dreaded losing his home, seeing no path forward. Now he stood in a grand estate, the caretaker of a storied legacy. He realized that beneath Beatrice's refined control lay vulnerabilities few ever saw. In a way, she was as cornered as he had been. Before retiring for the night, Connor stepped out onto a balcony that overlooked the moonlit gardens. Cedarvale Estate felt less alien now, though still daunting. As the newly minted husband of its owner, he sensed that guardianship of this place and the legacy of Judge Rowland would soon fall on him in ways he never expected. On the fourth day of their union, Connor found himself juggling his duties as sheriff with an unexpected new role, the public face of Cedarvale Estate, alongside Beatrice. His deputies, hearing of his rapid marriage, offered polite congratulations tinged with a confusion. The community at large, from diner patrons to old ranchers, whispered about the sudden alliance. Connor pressed on, determined to show that the uniform he wore remained unchanged in purpose. During a break, he returned to the office to sign routine documents. Not 10 minutes into that, Richard Denning strolled in. Denning was impeccably dressed with a face lined by decades of legal battles and a self-assured air that felt more like smugness. "Sheriff Walters," he greeted, voice resonating through the small office. "Congratulations on your marriage. Quite an unexpected development." Connor stood bracing for a confrontation. "Mr. Denning, surprised you visited me here rather than a formal meeting with Mrs. Rowland's legal team." Denning spread his hands, stepping closer to Connor's desk. "I believe in personal introductions. After all, we're set to cross paths. Often I find it interesting that you'd pledge yourself to a woman more than 30 years your senior, especially one engaged in a high-stakes inheritance dispute." Connor met Denning's gaze evenly. "My personal life isn't your concern, and my professional capacity as sheriff stands separate from any legal contest you might bring." Denning's lips curved into a thin smile. "We'll see if you maintain that stance when your wife's estate is under scrutiny. She's cunning, you know. There are hidden aspects of Cedarvale you might want to investigate before you place too much faith in its promised legacy. Meaning, let's just say that Judge Rowland kept secrets. The West Wing study might interest you." Denning gave a mock bow, stepping back. "Enjoy your new position. Sheriff, perhaps you'll uncover truths that Ms. Rowland prefers remain hidden." Then he exited, leaving Connor with a swirl of questions. That evening, returning to Cedarvale, Connor relayed Denning's cryptic hint to Beatrice. She reacted with calm resignation. "Denning likely means the private files William maintained. I haven't touched them since the funeral. If there's something in them Denning finds relevant, we should know what it is. Meet me in the West Wing after dinner. Dinner itself was subdued. Baked salmon, roasted vegetables, where Beatrice spoke politely about small matters, the blossoming rose garden, a charity event for the local hospital. Connor sensed her mind was elsewhere, bracing for the confrontation with whatever Judge Rowland's papers might hold. Jameson cleared the dishes, and they retired to the West Wing. A quarter Connor had only briefly explored. The West Wing felt different from the rest of the estate, quieter with lights burning low. Beatrice unlocked a polished oak door. Within was a stately study lined with shelves of legal volumes, a wide desk, and an ornate painting of Cedarvale's earliest days. Dust motes floated in the lamplight, suggesting this room wasn't used often. "You'll see," she murmured, crossing to an antique cabinet. "Richard believes you'll find something incriminating or scandalous here." She unlocked it with a small brass key I suspect we might find. William's deeper insights on Denning. Together, they opened the files. Flipping through, Connor saw meticulously typed notes of Denning's shady deals, overbilled clients, and suppressed evidence. Old letters revealed friction between Denning and the judge. It was enough to ruin a career if used. Beatrice exhaled. William never wanted to weaponize these. He believed in loyalty, even to a flawed partner. Now it may be the only shield we have. The reflection of lamplight in her eyes revealed grief for a lost friendship overshadowed by this new war. Denning had declared. That same evening, while Connor was still absorbing the revelations about Denning's conduct, Jameson knocked to inform them that Margaret Quinn, a key figure in the Rowland Foundation, had arrived. "Miss Quinn is in the drawing room, madam, quite anxious to speak with you both," the butler reported. Beatrice glanced at Connor. "That must be Margaret. She's the professional who helps run the Cedarvale Preservation Foundation. She's been away but must have heard about recent developments. We should talk to her." Olga Quinn turned out to be a poised woman in her 50s with auburn hair, swept back in a sleek style. She greeted them with a directness reminiscent of Beatrice. Her hazel eyes flicked from Beatrice to Connor and back. "I arrived early for tomorrow's board meeting. Word travels fast that Denning is stirring trouble." "Are you both all right?" Beatrice assured her. They were handling it. Margaret exhaled in relief. "Your sudden marriage, Miss Rowland, caused a stir. I only heard about it last night." "Congratulations, of course." Then she looked at Connor with curiosity. "Sheriff Walters, I gather you're stepping into quite a complex role, especially with the Foundation's future at stake. The Foundation's mission is crucial, but we face so many external pressures, developers, Denning's vendetta among others." Connor nodded. "I'm learning that Cedarvale's legacy is bigger than I first understood. The Foundation stands for historical and environmental preservation, right?" Precisely. It was Judge Rowland's dream to keep Cedarvale intact, resisting the kind of corporate expansion that has devoured other lakeside properties. "We do everything from ecological surveys to heritage tourism planning. If Denning undermines Miss Rowland's ownership, that vision could collapse." Beatrice gave a thin smile. "Richard hopes to carve out pieces of Cedarvale for profit. That's not going to happen." She gestured for Margaret to sit, then joined her on a sofa near the fireplace. Connor followed while Jameson disappeared soundlessly. The conversation that unfolded enlightened Connor further. The Cedarvale Foundation's board included Margaret Quinn as director, along with Dr. Stephen Carlisle, Mayor Watkins, and one seat once belonging to the judge himself. Now that seat effectively passed to Beatrice. The mission encompassed more than just the estate grounds it championed. Local habitat restoration, historical building, grants and education programs. "It's not just about one mansion by a lake," Margaret explained passionately. "Cedarvale is a symbol of River Pines County's heritage. If it falls into the wrong hands, we lose an anchor for this region's identity. It's farmland turning into cheap subdivisions. The lake polluted by jet skis, the old mill turned into a strip mall. The Foundation can't stop progress, but it can guide it responsibly." Beatrice's gaze flicked to Connor as if to say, "You see why this matters?" He did. The more he learned, the clearer the stakes became. This wasn't a mere real estate fight, but a battle over the soul of River Pines County. "I'll do what I can," Connor assured them. "Denning might test our unity, but we have an advantage." The documentation Judge Rowland gathered. "If Denning pushes too hard, we can push back." Margaret's eyes widened, then she gave an approving nod. "Then maybe we stand a real chance. Good to hear." When Margaret left to settle in a guest room, leaving them in the quiet glow of the fireplace, Beatrice and Connor exchanged a brief look of camaraderie. Their union, once purely transactional, had grown to represent something deeper, a shared responsibility. On the fifth day, Connor awakened to swirling doubts. The complexities of Cedarvale and Beatrice's world were far greater than he'd imagined, yet a newfound sense of commitment spurred him to see it through. After breakfast, he discovered that Beatrice had arranged a meeting with her longtime attorney, Patricia Moore, to finalize certain aspects of estate business in light of Denning's challenges. This time, Connor was to be fully involved, symbolizing that their alliance extended beyond surface-level appearances. When Patricia Moore arrived, a stern, silver-haired woman, she brought a no-nonsense attitude into the estate's front parlor. Over the course of an hour, she confirmed that all Denning's motions in probate court had been effectively countered or withdrawn thanks to the evidence Beatrice and Connor had located in Judge Rowland's files. Moore firmly believed the risk wasn't over, but Denning's immediate threat was diffused. After the meeting, Beatrice suggested they go outside for fresh air. She donned a tasteful shawl over her dress, and Connor helped her down the porch steps into the golden mid-morning sunlight. They strolled a winding path toward Lake Winston, passing meticulously trimmed shrubs and a stone fountain etched with the Rowland family crest. Eventually, they reached a quiet overlook where a bench offered panoramic views of the shimmering water. Beatrice sat carefully, her energy visibly low. Connor positioned himself beside her, close enough to offer assistance if needed, yet respectful of her independence. She gazed at the lake for a long moment before speaking, her voice touched by reflection. William once said this viewpoint was where he could see the future and the past converge. The lake never changes yet. Everything around it does. People come and go, families rise and fall. Cedarvale remains. Connor followed her gaze across the tranquil expanse. Sometimes I feel I've stepped into a current that's been flowing for generations. My cabin was simple, just me, my sister's memory, my duty as sheriff. Now I'm entwined in a legacy that belongs to a judge I barely knew, and a woman who's carried more burdens than anyone suspected. A quiet sincerity entered her tone. Your sister Claire might one day benefit from your new position. You've ensured her security as well as your own, which was part of our agreement, but I sense you are here for more than that now. He considered her words. I won't pretend it started any differently, but I've come to respect you deeply, not only for your generosity, but for your dedication to safeguarding something bigger than yourself. Cedarvale matters to River Pines to the foundation. And to me now, too. She nodded, a subtle relief in her posture. I'm glad. I'd hoped we might grow into genuine partners, not just legal cohabitants. My health remains uncertain, and I need someone who'll guard Cedarvale when I no longer can. Before he could answer, footsteps crunched on the gravel behind them. They turned to see Margaret Quinn approaching, a folder of documents clutched to her side. Her expression was urgent. Sorry to interrupt, but I just heard from a board member who claims Richard Denning might try to leak rumors about Judge Rowland's first wife and the tragedy that befell her. He thinks it might tarnish the estate's reputation if public sympathy turns. A chill ran through Connor. He'd learned from staff and from old caretaker accounts that Judge Rowland's first wife, Margaret, had struggled with depression, culminating in her tragic passing. If Denning dragged that into the public sphere, it could create a swirl of scandal around Cedarvale's storied history, overshadowing the philanthropic work at hand. Beatrice folded her hands, expression composed, but eyes reflecting steeled determination. Let him try. We have the final say with William's journals, with the evidence of Denning's own misconduct. And if he stoops to slinging tragedy about, he only reveals his desperation. Margaret Quinn nodded, relief flashing in her eyes. Then I'll pass it on to the board. No reason to panic. Denning's losing ground. Connor put a supportive hand on Beatrice's shoulder. He can't rewrite the truth. We know what happened. We know how William truly felt. And if Denning wants a public brawl, we're prepared. In the hours that followed, Connor found himself drawn once again to the late Judge Rowland's private study. Something about that room with its meticulously organized files and personal journals beckoned him. He believed he had read enough to understand William's stance on Denning and the foundation, but an instinct nudged him to search deeper. Early in the afternoon, he quietly slipped inside, shutting the door behind him. Dust motes danced in rays of sunlight that filtered through heavy drapes. The large mahogany desk gleamed from fresh polishing. A ghostly echo of the judge's presence, Connor began scanning the shelves for volumes that might not have been examined yet. He discovered a small, locked cabinet behind the stacked law digests. Fishing out a ring of keys from the desk, he tried them until one fit the cabinet's ornate lock. Inside lay a single worn leather notebook, smaller than the judge's standard journals. Opening it carefully, Connor found pages of personal reflection. The entries were from decades earlier, around the time of William's first wife's final days. He read lines describing Margaret Rowland's mental struggles, her guilt over introducing her cousin, the father of Beatrice's baby, to the young music teacher. There were notes of how William felt he'd failed her, regrets at being too occupied with his career to notice her spiraling depression. Connor's heart clenched at the raw emotion etched in the words, the judge's guilt shining through every sentence. One entry ended with, I must do right by those left behind. Beatrice especially. If I can shield her from scandal, maybe I'll atone for my failings with Margaret. Perhaps in time we'll find real companionship out of sorrow. Setting the notebook aside, Connor exhaled a shaky breath. This was a dimension of the judge's motives even Beatrice might not fully grasp, how profoundly Margaret's death influenced his decision to protect Beatrice, to support her adoption secret, and eventually to marry her. The memory haunted him so deeply that every philanthropic or personal move afterward carried the weight of reparation. Just then the door creaked open. Beatrice stood on the threshold, glancing from Connor to the open cabinet. There was no anger on her face, only resignation. You found that? Oh, I see, she said softly. Connor rose. I thought I'd seen everything. Didn't know this notebook was here. She moved closer, her gaze drifting to the notebook's battered cover. William confided more personal struggles in that than in his official journals. He never let me read it, though. He mentioned once it contained regrets about Margaret. I never pressed him. Connor placed the notebook in her hands gently. He loved you, he said. These pages might be painful, but they show the depth of his determination to make amends, to do right by everyone affected by her death. Her eyes glistened, yes. That was William, always seeking the moral high ground, even when consumed by guilt. She closed her hand around the notebook. Thank you for bringing it to me. Another puzzle piece about the man I married, and perhaps a clue for how to move forward with Cedarvale. Later that evening, as the sun sank behind Lake Winston, painting the water in rose and amber, Connor and Beatrice convened on Cedarvale's front porch. A gentle breeze carried the fragrance of late-blooming wildflowers. Over the past 5 days, their union had unraveled secrets, both personal and legal, bridging a gap neither had anticipated crossing. Now the house felt like a space where both the judge's memories and their new partnership intertwined. They spoke quietly of the day's revelations. The final withdrawal of Denning's challenges was set to be officially logged in court, ensuring Cedarvale's immediate future. The staff, aware of the legal victory, moved about with a renewed sense of security. Margaret Quinn, concluding her foundation board meeting, confirmed that community support stood firmly behind the foundation's mission. Yet in the hush of the twilight, Connor detected a shift in Beatrice, a release of tension she had carried for years. You've done more than you promised, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You could have shown up, offered a veneer of public respectability, and collected your inheritance in time. Instead, you engaged wholeheartedly, defending Cedarvale as if it were your own legacy to protect. He settled beside her on a cushioned porch swing, old wooden slats creaking softly. When I took this on, it was for my cabin for Claire, but every day at Cedarvale opened my eyes to Judge Rowland's vision. Your devotion to preserving his legacy and the intricate ties that bind this estate to River Pines County. It became personal. Her shoulders, always so elegantly held, relaxed slightly. I was afraid, she admitted, voice trembling with honesty. Afraid that this arrangement would remain a hollow pact, that you'd resent me or treat me as a burdensome commodity. But you showed me kindness, respect, and a willingness to shoulder burdens, not even fully yours. They both gazed out at the lake, quiet for a spell, hearing only the distant chirp of crickets and the rustle of leaves. Finally, Connor spoke, conviction in his tone. I see Cedarvale differently now. Not just a lavish mansion, it's a testament, the Rowlands, to an ideal of preserving what's precious in a world that changes too fast. And I see you too, Beatrice. A woman who faced adversity in her youth, who lost a child to adoption, who endured people's gossip and still stands strong. She glanced at him, eyes warm. I never expected a second chance at real companionship, let alone in my 70s. Judge Rowan offered me one second chance, and now, perhaps ironically, his arrangement for me to marry you has given me another. Connor reached for her hand. The gesture no longer felt awkward or forced. Whatever time you have left, I'm here. Maybe the doctor says 2 years, maybe more. We'll walk this path together as more than just a contractual pair. However unconventional it began, it's real enough to me. A slight moisture gathered in her eyes and her lips curved in a gentle, vulnerable smile. Thank you, Connor Walters. 5 days ago, you were a stranger marrying me for reasons of necessity. Now I can't imagine facing these trials without you. In the hush of that twilight, they sat hand in hand, the weight of Cedarvale's storied past settling around them. They felt it not as a burden, but as a continuation of something greater, a legacy of second chances. Surrounded by the lake's evening hush and the estate's timeless aura, they understood that what started as a desperate bargain had evolved into genuine partnership and respect. They watched the moon rise above Lake Winston, thankful for the quiet moment. The storms of rumor and legal wrangling might never fully disappear. But for now, they had each other, and that was enough. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more days of bridging old histories and forging new paths. Yet these 5 days had changed everything, binding two distinct lives into a shared future at Cedarville Estate, one that might against all odds stand steadfast even after the final shadows of dispute passed into memory. Looking back on those 5 whirlwind days, it's astonishing how a bargain made from pure necessity blossomed into something deeper. In marrying a wealthy widow nearly twice his age, Connor Walters expected mere financial relief, an end to crushing debts, and a secure home for his sister. But uncovering the mansion's forgotten secrets changed his perspective. He found an unexpected bond with Beatrice. Roland built not on romantic ideals but on mutual respect in a shared mission to safeguard Judge Roland's vision. Challenges that once seemed insurmountable, like legal vendettas and buried family scandals, were overcome by honesty, loyalty, and a willingness to stand up for one another. From my viewpoint, this outcome underscores how the unlikeliest of alliances can carry genuine warmth and renewal. It's a testament that sincerity can grow from the most unconventional starts. What do you think? Share your reactions or questions in the comments. We'd love to hear your take on Connor and Beatrice's journey. And remember to subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories that prove hope can flourish against all odds.